again, the postbiotics, hormones are a postbiotic. Then we're gonna have like some of our steroid hormones and our neurotransmitters, right? So in the gut, like dopamine, serotonin, produced by some bacteria, but also some of the enterochromaffin cells. So there's so many things that are going to be considered in that postbiotic realm.
Man, well, I like so on this four Ps. One of the peptides. I don't know if you guys have been using lorazepatide yet, but lorazepatide is pretty interesting because it's a peptide that's in clinical trials. They found it was much more superior to the placebo with like celiac symptoms in patients who are undergoing a gluten challenge. And this has been a game changer, even for people who are very sensitive to gluten, not necessarily celiacs, but it is FDA approved to treat, patients who have celiac issues. But have you started using lorazepatide yet, Dan?
No, it's funny. I'm not kidding. Just yesterday, I was digging into some research on it, and I was looking at how lorazepatide actually blocks zonulin
Yes.
to minimize the opening up of the tight junctions. I was just studying that yesterday. So awesome. No, I hadn't used it yet. That's incredible.
Yeah, and so lorazepatide has been one, because we've always used BPC 157, KPV, and man, now that the BPC is in the arginate form, or it's in the arginate form in the gut tides, and then it's got the acetyl groups, so it's acetylated BPC.
Yeah.
It's just like it works so much better, and so not all BPC 157 is the same. A lot of people just think, oh, it's BPC, it's going to be great, but we're just seeing a lot bigger effects. And for our clients who have really severe like colitis or celiacs or Crohn's disease, or usually autoimmunity, it's not just one autoimmune disease people have, it's multiple. And when you stack lorazepatide, KPV with the BPC 157, it's pretty remarkable. We've seen indigestion go away, bloating, stools get formed again. It's kind of a little hack that I'm pretty pumped about. But anything else you learned on it? It works on one of the big things that you mentioned, Dan, is the fact that it's a zonulin antagonist. It promotes the rearrangement of the tight junction proteins and actin filaments. So that's one of the ways it helps restore the gut barrier function. And then one of the things that was interesting too is it reduced, this is in celiac patient, but it reduced the event of gluten-related diarrhea compared to placebo. And so I mean, if you think about how many of our clients have gluten issues,
Yeah.
it's like almost all of them.
That's yeah, right. I mean, but the thing is, when we look at the response that people have, there's been some pretty good studies where they're looking at, a gluten response in a non-celiac person. You still have that zonulin release, especially with the dwarf wheat, right? It's got such a strong response there. Like everybody's gonna have some degree of leaky gut, and because of that, some type of blood sugar dysregularity after certain breads and gluten products.
Yeah, it's a powerful one, and so here's one of the studies where they found that they're looking at dosing, and they found that the 0.5 milligram dose showed an effect of 26% of a decrease in celiac disease, as far as symptomatic outcomes go. And then in another group, it was actually a 31% increase in improved symptoms. And then there was a 50% reduction from baseline of the weekly average of abdominal pain score. And this is just on 0.5 milligrams. And then they found that by increasing it to 1 or even 2 milligram doses, didn't necessarily have any additional benefits. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool because if you start looking at, lorazepatide, and you start looking at some of these peptides that exist in the gut already, and if you just give them a little bit of a jump start, it changes the whole metabolic structure. And then when you're throwing in things like the, Tributrin or Akkermansia, or you've got the calcium D-glucarate you're using for your, patients who have high beta glucuronidase, for example, everything just works better and faster is what I've noticed.
Yeah. I haven't, I need to dig more into it. I think we'll definitely, based on, what I was looking at yesterday, and now that you're bringing it up today, that's definitely gonna have to be something in our arsenal.
Have you tried, we talked about adipetide last time. Have you started using that one yet? That
Not
peptide?
yet, not yet. Our last collaborative was really close to this one, so I
I know,
hadn't
it
given
was only
it
like
a chance.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
ACE 31, have you got on ACE 31 yet?
no, got some of that ordered though. I can't wait.
Sorry, I'm just like,
No, I'm
this is
excited. Have
my,
you tried that one yet?
oh my God, I'm on round two, and it is crazy how, like, I just feel so strong on it. It's amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Yeah. I think to add that to my favorite blend, I always talk about the CJCF Merlin IGF-1 with some it's ACE-031, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, Ace 031. I just call it Ace 31. It's easier. But hey, we got a question for coming in for you, Dan. Can you please comment on the role of digestive enzymes when it comes to gut health? Amylase, lipase, protease, lactase, sucrase, etc. They're not really important, so I think we can skip that
Yeah,
question.
we're just gonna skip over that. No. Hey, Vesna, so happy you're here. Vesna and I've connected on LinkedIn a few times,
Cool.
so happy you're here. Yeah, so a couple of different things, right? So the very first thing is, and this is really important anytime you're talking to somebody that has really severe food sensitivities, is we talked about pattern recognition when it comes to food proteins. So when you have an immunological response to foods, there's going to be two major pieces. It's either going to be to the protein or it's going to be to the sugar molecule. And if it's the sugar molecule, that's like a true intolerance, like lactose intolerance or fructose intolerance. So those people have an immediate response, and it usually doesn't have a long-term ramification. They'll get gas bloating for a few hours, but it's like they clear up pretty quick, right? Now it can damage some of these non-digested sugars can damage the microvilli in the gut. Now, and you can also feed a lot of microbes you don't want to feed if you're not breaking that stuff down. The next piece is the food proteins, and the food proteins are this is where you get molecular responses or molecular mimicry, or you get the cross reactivity, and in the dendritic cells and these IgA antibodies in the body will respond to it. What's important to remember about that is you have an immunological response to a food protein if it's not totally broken down. So, you have to have about 4 aminos to 5 amino chain big enough for the immune system to see it. The immune system can only see things over 5,000 Daltons. So, good stomach acid, good pancreatic enzymes, good bile salts, they break down foods thoroughly enough where they're like particles that the immune system can't even have a response to. And so that's the first part, is being able to break it down so that, if you've had kind of like a pre setup where some of it's gotten through the barrier before, for whatever reason, even if you have like a super damaged gut, one of the key things is make sure someone's chewing their food. They start getting that salivary amylase and the lipase in their mouth that starts to break things down. That activates the vagus. They're going to produce a lot of stomach acid. That's going to help break down the stomach acid increase. It's going to trigger something called secretin. That's going to trigger the pancreatic enzymes and the bile. And that's going to fully emulsify and break down all these food proteins. And that should break it down into individual amino acids. People shouldn't have an immunological response. Now, once that sensitivity's gotten really bad, you got to really be careful because they can actually trigger it just by getting the food protein in their mouth. So really cooking it well. But it's like once the barrier is gone, you can actually really help these responses. Now, the enzymes. So that's one of the things that the enzymes do, is they break it down so that the food protein you're not response to. The next piece to that is the enzymes actually keep bacteria from growing where they're not supposed to. Right. So the very like a lot of times, like you remember a few years ago, Reagan, like Chipotle had that like salmonella outbreak or something. It
Was
was,
it
I think,
Chipotle?
Chipotle. It was, I think it was here in
Yikes.
Denver. Yeah, yeah. It was
I
like,
didn't hear about that. Darn it.
yeah, they were like, we're gonna add probiotics to our food. They just chose the wrong one. No, the technically,
It's true.
it is it is an
Hey,
accurate
good
statement.
news. We
You
gave you
say
some extra probiotics.
you say contamination, we say probiotic, right? Uh, but so the not everybody that got the contaminated food got sick because the quality of their stomach acid, that's your first non-specific barriers, stomach acid and digestive enzymes. They're breaking down these things so that these microbes can't survive and then grow. So you have that's
Yeah.
your second layer. So those enzymes actually they keep stuff from getting into the microbiome to colonize, but also once it's in there, like those enzymes are being released into the upper part of the small intestine, and that keeps the microbes from being able to grow from the large intestine up into the small intestine. So it keeps microbes in their place. So
Yeah.
those are three really key things that those do. And then by breaking down food thoroughly, we keep we keep damage from occurring, right? Because you really need that. And the last piece was if you can't thoroughly break down your food, you can't absorb the micronutrients that are required to then feed the immune system. So I'd say with enzymes, it would be like four really key pieces that you have to have them.
Couldn't agree more. And even when you travel, one of the hacks that I learned yesterday, we had a retreat at the office, and I was talking about Mexico, and one thing that a couple of our clients do is they'll do the acid challenge, where you take betaine hydrochloride to the point where you feel a little bit of like acidity in your stomach, and that's where you
Yeah.
know you've hit your benchmark. And I was like, oh, that is brilliant. So that's what I'm going to do traveling now, because it's that first layer. I mean, and yeah, part of it is our gut biome, but you see people in Mexico, Peru, wherever, like they're not getting sick, and it's going to require a lot more, practice on our part. We live in these sterile environments. People aren't exposed to dirt. We're washing our hands every 3 minutes. And so yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I promised I'd mention here too is on the peptide side. We talked a little bit about lorazepam, and hopefully you guys, if you get a chance, dig into that. It's phenomenal. If you're looking for, something to stop the expression and transportation of zonulin, and a peptide that literally it's in our body to redesign those tight gap junctions. So it will create for a lot more fluidity, a better nutritional flow. But the other thing is, think about KPV. And KPV is an interesting peptide because it works on the melanocyte stimulating hormone pathways like this. In Chinese medicine, it would be like your Wei Qi. And KPV, BPC 157, melanotan 1, melanotan 2, these are all kind of in the same camp. And as far as like mold, which we haven't really brought up yet, or kind of fungi overgrowth or mycotoxins, that is a really good starting point that we found for some of these molds. And we'll even use melanotan. We'll say, hey, well, do you want to treat your gut and get tan at the same time, or do you just want to stay white and treat your gut? And you can let the patient choose. And if they want a little tan, then melanotan seems to do the trick. But it also is incredibly supportive when you're treating mold exposures. Have you had any experience? Do you use any KPV or melanotan for mycotoxic infections in the gut?
Yeah, we've been using KPV, and then we started using that with some of those people that have really, really severe food sensitivities. We've been using the KPV from Integrative Peptides the spray. The oral
Yeah.
spray is great for kids that have disrupted microbiomes because that you can't, you don't want to do injections. So we've been doing the oral KPV, the thymosin beta 4, the frag, and then the BPC sprays. Those have been incredible for little kids with gut dysbiosis and gut health issues.
Oh, yeah, and the sprays are kind of nice. And do you find any difference between the capsules and sprays as far as like dosing goes?
No, I don't, it's funny, because usually we're using it more specifically. I'll only use the capsules for people who can't do the injections.
Yeah.
If it's outside the gut, I mean, but what's weird is, and my original thought was, hey, for the gut, the capsules are probably better than the injections. That has not been the case at all. The capsules seem to be good for the stomach, but if
Yeah.
there's a small intestine or a colon issue, the injections hands down are, I mean, it's not even comparable.
Yeah.
Like, or for tissue damage outside of that. I only use the capsules if I have to. The sprays, I think because you get oral absorption way better. I think the sprays are a better alternative, especially for children. And I'm
Yeah.
only using the capsules if when I absolutely need to for somebody who has extreme needle phobia. I mean, what about you? What have you seen?
Yeah, it's the same. We find just injections in general. If someone's got a pretty severe gut issue, you want to bypass the liver, you want to bypass the gut as much as you can, or you want to bypass the gut so it can get metabolized in the liver
Yeah.
quickly. And so that's where the injection comes in. And KPV is like, I mean, it's a tripeptide. So for those of you, kind of peptide nerds out there, this falls into that category of the so-called bioregulator peptides. And it's just three peptide chains folded in a particular fashion. And the best thing that the research shows on this is not only does it work on this alpha MSH pathway or the melanocyte stimulating hormone, it's anti-inflammatory. It's got the ability to attenuate any kind of inflammatory issues in the epithelial cells in the colon and the immune cells. One of the studies they induced colitis in mice, and they gave one group of mice the water and just water. The other group got KPV in the water, and so Dan, with mice, what they found is that after about 2 weeks, the mice that got the KPV, their colitis went into remission, whereas the other group that just got the water, the control group, they continued with their colitis. So with mice, you can actually, if you happen to, want to feed your mouse some KPV, it works just as well for colitis anyways. Humans, we would do injections.
Yeah. I like I'm huge on the injections. But that's what I love. It's like the KPV and then like the BPC, because one of the things we were talking about is when you've had that disrupted gut, especially for a long time, and even in studies on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and alcohol fatty liver disease, when you're looking at alcoholics, a large majority of them do not develop fatty liver until they have leaky gut. And so now the liver's detoxification is massively slowed down because the permeability of the gut, those microbes are going right into the liver. And we have immune cells in the liver called Kupffer cells, and they'll go through an inflammatory process. And you start getting all this accumulation of fat particles in the liver from an inflammatory response. So that's one of the things we've been finding with the BPC is you get it to help the tight junctions in the gut, but it also helps repair the fatty liver process. And I remember that study we saw on the rats that you brought up about it repairing the hepatic portal from it just being put in their water. So like combining the KPV and the BPC is super powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, they're both made in the gut. And these are peptides that we've seen little to no adverse effects from. I mean, I can't think of a single case in KPV. I've had one, maybe two patients with BPC 157, and they felt like it exacerbated some of their autoimmune conditions, made them really tired. I was like, I don't know, but that's all I haven't seen any literature on it, but man, KPB, this bioregulator peptide's great. Melanotan's interesting because melanotan in the initial studies, I don't know if you've looked into melanotan much on, yes, it does work on that same that MSH pathway. But it also it does trigger the melanin production, so you get a little bit of tanning. But the thing they found in the studies, originally they were looking at it as protection against skin cancer, and some of the dudes in the trial, similar to Viagra, ended up with erections. And one of the gentlemen ended up with an erection for 30 hours because they were testing
Oh,
doses. And so, and we talked about this on the last collaborative, which is, with PT141, you had the patient that misread the label and ended up with some
10x, he 10x the dose.
he's like, hey, I'm going to go all in on this.
He was like, he read 10x is better than 2x or easier than 2x.
10x is easier than 2x. And he's like, that was much easier, but it just, once you get there. But with the melanotan, that's one of the reasons they discontinued the study is because, if you have an erection for more than, about 30 hours, that's when you can get scarring that builds up in the
Yeah.
tissue itself, and it's irreparable for the most part. So what's interesting is they found that in all the inflammatory markers in the people who were using melanotan, the inflammatory markers went down. And then the MSH pathway is a curious pathway because PT141 also works on that pathway, and it's approved by the FDA to treat female hypoarousal disorder. So, Dan, do you know any connection between this MSH pathway and the gut?
I'm not 100%, familiar with that particular pathway. I haven't studied the MSH pathway hard. I know it is it helps, amplify healthy immune responses, but that those particular pathways not something I've researched.
Yeah, it's and that's the first time you haven't had a pretty good answer.
I know
Uh,
I feel like I let you down.
well, all right. So here's what I found, because I've never like just done a deep dive into both, and so this is why we have the collaborative, so Dan and I can learn new things as we go. But um, here's what they found: there is the presence of melanocortin receptors, particularly MC1R, MC3R, and MC4R. Watch, Dan will memorize those. Just by the way, that was a side note your Dan's not supposed to hear, that are expressed in the intestinal epithelium and other gut tissues. So these melanocortin receptors are right there in the gut. And they mediate the effects of the alpha MSH and related peptides on gut function. So the effects on gut morphology, the MSH influences intestinal villi, length, and the crypt depth, and potentially affecting nutrient absorption. So you know how when you use melanotan, you get nauseated for a minute afterwards, or
Yeah.
PT141? So now I'm starting to see like this big connection, because if you're influencing the villi and the crypt depth, I can see that creating a little bit of nausea, and then it plays a role in gut motility and transit times. And this is where I've actually had patients, come to think of it, who have noticed that their bowels move much better when they use melanotan, and they're like, I like it for the skin, but I really like it for the sexual function, and I also noticed that my bowels move better. And if you think about like erectile dysfunction, or if you have like a weak pelvic floor, constipation is typically goes along with erectile dysfunction. There's, if it's not a vascular issue, right? So this is pretty interesting. It's got anti-inflammatory properties, which affects the gut, protects it against inflammatory conditions like colitis. It can reduce the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines like NF-kappa beta activation in the epithelial cells. It provides
Wow.
barrier protection, so it reserves the tight gap junction proteins like ZO1 and claudin 4. It helps with leaky gut, associated with the inflammation. It interacts with the gut microbiota. So this influences the composition and structure of the gut microbiota. It has sex-specific interactions between the MSH peptides, diet and gut microbiota. It helps with appetite regulation. So it works on the hypothalamic neurons to suppress appetite and food intake. And I definitely would agree with that. And then the gut microbiota can influence the process through production of the peptides that mimic the MSH, such as CLPB. It works on the gut-brain axis. It helps with bidirectional communication with appetite regulation, energy metabolism, and even mood and behavior. So the peptides such as KPV, that work on this pathway show promising trends in treating IBS. So otherwise, it doesn't really interact with the gut. Oh, there you go, Dan. We both learned something new. How cool is that?
That is awesome. So tight junction proteins and it sounds like it's probably paracellular leaky gut versus transcellular, and then also the anti-inflammatory pathway like TNF alpha. That's huge.
Yeah, and it's interesting too on it. I mean, like lorazepam changes the structure of the gut. Any of these peptides on the MSH, like the KPB, the BPC, or the KPB, the PT141, the melanotan 1 and 2. So it's like it's got structural processes to it, and that's one of the things that peptides do is they bind right on the surface of the cell, and they can change the integrity of the cell just by getting that gene turned on. Yeah, pretty interesting. Wow.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And so Vesna is asking, can KP be used topically for the skin inflammation, like adolescent skin acne? If yes, what have you observed in terms of response time? Any thoughts on that, Dan?
What's that?
On the KPV for skin inflammation, using it topically? I have not seen it used topically, but I'd imagine it could be. Have you ever had it compounded topically?
No, actually, I did use it topically. I had a kid that was having chronic skin breakouts.
Yeah.
And we also had an adult that he had a flare with his eczema, and we used the KPV spray from Integrative Peptides,
No,
and that
okay.
that was actually really helpful.
Just the spray. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah,
sticky, but
yeah.
who cares?
Sprayed it on the lesions, and it was incredibly helpful.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant. So, in Vesna, you can use like GHK copper is a very common thing to use with inflammation, and GHK copper has also once again another bioregulator, like a small tripeptide that cleans up the DNA in the cells, and you can use that on the skin. It's good for the gut. But what was the response time? I mean, it cleared up pretty quick for the kid.
You remember? Yeah, for the kid, it was very quick. We were also working on the gut. The kid had chronic constipation and really, really poor diversity. And I put him on, I love L-theanine, and L-theanine regulated his stool. And I thought, well, is it just because maybe the kid's got like a nervous system disruption? Then I was looking at research, and L-theanine acts like a short chain fatty acid and feeds the microbiome, and it helps with tight junction proteins. I was like, I had no idea.
Theanine does?
L-theanine, yeah, it helps the tight junctions, and
What?
it's like a probiotic through short chain fatty acid signaling. So I was like, okay. So the kids started using the bathroom better. We used KPV spray orally. And then he also had some skin conditions related, it was like this autoimmune cascade. He's only 5 years old. But spray on the skin, cleared up the skin probably within about 2 weeks of doing all of those. I didn't even use a probiotic. I only used L-theanine, KPV, and the BPC spray. It was crazy. And his mom she started making him some homemade gummies with probiotics in there.
Yeah.
That was the next step we added in. But do you remember? Probably it was about this time last year. I had a guy had really severe eczema, and he had it was bad. And we were having he had a flare, and I
Yeah.
called you, and we put him on KPV and LL37,
Yeah. I
and
do remember.
then we used topical GHK copper. And then the only thing is, he had a lesion on his hand that was just it was like it looked like he lost like 3 or 4 layers of skin. It was nasty. His skin started healing up really well. The only
Wow.
thing that didn't was the hand. And what we did with the hand is, we had a patient come in that had done some exosomes. And you know how there's usually a little bit of fluid left in the bottom of that vial?
Yeah.
We used 2 of the vials, soaked that into some gauze, and put that on his hand, and that healed the hand.
Just the remnants of the exosomes. So probably
Yeah.
like 100 million, little guys is all,
Yep.
and that healed it up.
Healed it up. That's the we've seen that 3 times now. We had an amputee, and he had a pressure wound that would not heal, and he'd been there for 3 years, and he couldn't afford any stem cell. And we were like, well, let's give this a shot, because we had a lady that had lesions on her hand that we'd seen that work before. Remember, uh, Elliot had that spackle.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We used the spackle on the lady, but we had the guy come in. We did the same thing with the gauze, put him on his stump, and that healed the pressure wound. And
Gee.
it was one time. It was
Mm.
so crazy. So it's like, and the we've talked about the gut being the richest source of stem cells, and using the exosomes and the cord plasma, these things to help heal the gut. Because we're seeing it. It's like our skin's just the if we turned ourselves inside out, our skin would be our gut, and our gut would be our skin, right? So,
Yeah.
um, it's phenomenal. But yeah,
Mm.
it was for the kid, on the skin, and it had amazing results very quickly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's so interesting because, you look at upstream, we were trained in, get the enzymes right. And if any of you have read Julian Ender's book, I think it's just called Gut. It is just called Gut. She's from Germany, really sweet girl. But she illustrates the importance of chewing the food and how you start the breakdown of the simple sugars, and then you activate this, just chewing food in general is going to be really good to activate things. And then it allows your esophagus to open, and then you swallow food, and then it's like the oven. I mean, and then once the oven, it breaks down and denatures the proteins. And this is where in Chinese medicine, it's like, hey, don't eat a bunch of raw food, because you're going to put out the fire in the oven, and it takes too much metabolic energy to heat it up. And it just makes perfect sense, especially when people are trying to get enzymes. And if you have these cellulose walls that are capturing the vitamins and nutrients in there, you just kind of break it open with some light cooking. And that's one of the ways we evolved, because our ancestors, our apes, not our Neanderthal ancestors, Dan, but the before that was, yeah, these were the apes. And their digestive tracts, I mean, they have to eat like 8 hours a day just to feed themselves. But what we did is we have a shortened digestive tract. And so that means like nutrition for humans is so much more critical than it is for other animals, because we have to break down all of these nutrients, and we're omnivores. If you look at your teeth structure, so you need a certain amount of proteins, fats, carbohydrates, but if you're not digesting them properly, then you have a massive energy deficit. And I think this is where the excitement of politics comes in. And Dan did want to talk about who he's voting for today. He asked if he could have just a few. No, I'm joking. Dan's like, I didn't say that, but
Jesus.
but I think this is I put you on the spot. I think this is where it's interesting, because if you look at the food right now, and I've been deep into the book Dark Calories, because I'll be interviewing the author very soon. But man, it is just like the more you look into what we've done to our food and then how the food is wrecking our digestive system, the more it's like, man, we're always going to have work to do on the digestive system, because even if you're eating organic, you're still not getting like the pure food. Like, it's the proteins are different. And now, it doesn't just go from chewing the food and this nice gentle process of having the right the proper balance of acidity. Although these things help, having the right enzymes are great, but it's also like getting rid of those plant oils, the seed oils, getting rid of the glyphosate that's in our food, reading labels again, and it's kind of interesting. So maybe you could touch on that. Like, how are you just generally helping avoid the interferences that come from just the garbage processed food that's out there?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you want to do is try to go whole foods as much as possible, and you're going to have the glyphosate, you're going to have these things. So that's why, you know, trying to get it from a clean source as much as possible, right?
Mhm.
That's always a good place to start. While you're doing that, you want to use some of the things because the micronutrients are depleted, and you can utilize things like amino acids, right? They're about 5 grams of amino acids is equivalent to 30 grams of protein. So it's like a scoop, and you're not getting the calories. If you're like using something like Thorne, which is a really clean product, on someone you're trying to heal the gut with, you're not really overburdening the gut. You're giving them, the resources to protect their lean muscle mass, giving them the amino acids to build up all these protein structures in the body, like their hormones and neurotransmitters, but also tissue. So like you can scale down on how much you're eating, take advantage of really good products. I hate being heavy on supplements. I really not happy with the supplement industry, but we have a couple, reliable sources, but you know, eat clean, supplement where you can, and then you have to make sure that the gut microbiome is constantly being supported because most of the time if you have a really robust microbiome and your liver pathways, your hepatic bowel transformation pathways are being properly supported, you can still do pretty well, right? So sometimes just taking something simple like ion, getting those humic and fulvic acids, those bind to things like glyphosate. They also bind up to some of these preservatives and some of the bio and endotoxins that are being produced. You can use those things to your advantage, so that in a toxic world, we can at least survive well, right? And get some recovery and still, live a decent life. But I'd say clean up, eat as clean and as a natural, sourced diet as possible. Get some of these like humic and fulvic acid, I think probably one of the most revolutionary things that we've had in a long time.
Yeah.
And it also helps the gut microbiome. And that just recently, I learned yesterday, um, humic and fulvic acid, or the Shilajit,
Yeah.
shown to increase total and free testosterone by 20% by itself. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, I think so using those to our advantage and then using it like our peptides and other interventions when we can.
Yeah. And this is where we've used Cellcore for a long time. You guys have heard me talk about them. They were the first company to really introduce this whole suite of products with the fulvic and humic acid, the citric acid, and looking at all the carbon chains, because I think we have to really consider detoxification as part of the gut process. There's no way you're getting around it these days. And if Shilajit is, if it's true that it can increase testosterone by 20%, which it's not surprising, then we say, okay, well, maybe we're onto something, because what's that removing? It's removing those endocrine disruptors, right? Like the plastics and the phthalates and all of the garbage that interferes with your body's ability to make testosterone. Now your body's calling for more because you don't have, it's not getting confused by these molecules, this molecular mimicry from all the environmental toxins. So So I think, I'm on a continual, I take fulvic humic acid literally every day. I have for probably 3 years now of some form, either it's a variant in either biotoxin binder, the heavy metal environmental toxin binder, or the VidRad chem binder. Drainage activator now is amazing for the lymphs, but I think those are things that you touched on that are really critical.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're so important. And adding in like a good fiber product, I think is really, important. As long as someone doesn't have, what looks to be like or seems to be like a SIBO process happening. And I don't hyper focus on that. I feel like that's a symptom and not a primary cause for me. But the but yeah, good fiber, get a decent probiotic, get your diversity of food fibers. It's better to get it from the food. So eat the colors, because it's the non-nutrient aspect of foods like fruits and vegetables that feed the microbiome. They feed on the fiber, but it's all the polyphenols, and those flavonoids, what are they? Tannins and flavonoids and coumarins, all these like different polyphenol compounds. They're what like feed the bacteria and create this diversity of this robust microbiome. So eat the colors, get the fibers, you know, minimize your exposure to all of these preservatives, and support the detoxification process as much as possible. And then,
Yeah.
we talked about, giving your gut a break, you know, doing some fasting if you're not too hypoglycemic, letting your gut repair, eating in a way to give your gut a chance to actually heal itself. So critical.
Yeah. Well, and back to the political piece that Dan's going to talk about in a minute. I was really excited when RFK and you got Trump. They're like, okay, we're going to be aligned on this mission of creating generational health. Because if you look at what's going on in our country right now, probably the biggest risk that's not being talked about much is this risk of health, like what's going on with our kids. And you talked about fertility in the last session, so you guys want to go back and listen to that because it's phenomenal. But we're having more metabolic dysfunction at younger and younger ages. Every year it gets worse and worse. And the funny thing is it's like, yeah, we've got these great weight loss peptides, which we're all big fans of if used properly. But now you got the pharmaceutical company that's got their greedy hands on, Ozempic and Mounjaro, and there'll be new ones coming out too. But yeah, they want to start giving these drugs to kids as young as 6 years old. And it's like, hey, before we start writing out those prescriptions, maybe we could get things cleaned up a little bit in the environment. And so hopefully this will, we'll see some big changes that will lead to better gut health, because right now people get a parasite, and I don't know if you've seen it, Dan, but what used to be, we could clear it out with like some simple, here's some black walnut and some basic herbs to flush it. Now we're really having to work hard and hitting it from multiple angles. And I think it all goes back to what we're putting in our mouth. So on the gut, we're going to take a little pause there, and then we're going to shift gears and go into some of the regenerative medicine. But before I move on, Dan, any final thoughts on the gut, or anyone out there have anything that was missed on the gut besides the Bristol stool chart that maybe I thought you were going to show that, Dan, but I guess you guys are going to have to look it up yourself.
I just like, if I had to draw a race board, we'd draw it out. I feel like if you draw it, you really know it. So maybe next time.
Just think Hanky the Christmas poo, and that will give
Yeah.
you the perfect stool.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. All right, we'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll be back. Appreciate you guys.
All right.
Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be right back. Hey, and we got a few of you on here that are new to the channel, so welcome. Excited to have you. yeah, stay tuned, everybody. Tucker, how's it going there?
Going awesome. Yeah, always amazing info from those two. Love just I get to sit and listen to them talk back and forth all day long as I'm like Googling things like what does that mean? And
What is
yeah,
that?
yeah,
Yeah, it's awesome.
it's
Yeah, I
going
know we're
great.
going to be jumping into some really cool stuff coming up here. If you guys joining us live have any questions or anything that you'd like to dive a little deeper in, send them into the chat box right now, so we can kind of handle those as they come in. But yeah, really appreciate everyone joining us. We've had some awesome questions, awesome interactions so far, and yeah, looking forward to the next piece. Yeah, and if you're new to Go Wellness, not part of the group, we have and want to dive deeper. I know Tucker will put a link into the chat box here, or I can as well, if you don't have it there. But yeah, you can dive in, learn how you can kind of work at a deeper capacity or deeper level with us here at Go Wellness, have access to all these recordings as well as a slew of our content, and as well as a little more access to Reagan, Dan, myself, and everything. Yeah, and Shelly, Dr. Shelly, thanks for asking, where can I get the recordings? So we house these recordings in our portal. So that's where if you're in one of the memberships, you can have access to all the past recordings, any of the future stuff, and there's some huge value add nuggets in there. So take a look at those options on that link that Tucker just posted there. GoWellness.com / collab dash membership dash options.
And
So mouthful
just so
there.
you know, the recordings are in any membership tier, so any member gets access to all the recordings, not just moving forward, but the whole large inventory of past recordings. And then as you look at the different memberships, there's a bunch of other content and education and trainings and access that you can get. So it just kind of depends on how deep you want to dive and what you want this to do. If this is something that you're wanting to implement into your own practice, or you're dipping your toe in the water with peptides, there's a membership option that's a right size fit for you. And if you aren't sure which one you want to go with, or which one would maybe be the most applicable to where you are right now, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to jump on a call and talk through the differences so that you can decide which route you'd like to go.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, cool. Well, I know Reagan's gonna be hopping back on here in just a moment. But we'll go ahead and let you guys take a quick drink break, bathroom break, and we'll be right back.
See you soon.
All right, everybody. Welcome back. Dr. Dan in the house.
Buddy.
So, a lot of cool things when you start looking at what allowed us to form in our mom's womb. And, I like to send my mom flowers on my birthday because it's kind of weird. We call it a happy birthday because like 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 birthday is like, you think of like the actual process of it, like we had nothing to do with it. We just kind of were along for the ride. And I'm sure when the doctors pulled us out of the womb, it said, wow, well, good luck with this one, but yeah, you're having a boy, and slightly Neanderthalish for Dan and I, but it's kind of an interesting thing because if you think about the progress that we've made in using birth tissue since we started, I mean, it's been over a decade now. But what's the different things that you've realized, like if you went back in time, Dan, when you started seeing these therapies and using them in your clinic to what you see now? Like what was your confidence level like then, and then what's it like now, and what are the things you thought it did that it doesn't do, and then what are the things that it does do that surprised you?
Man, that's a loaded question. There's a lot to unpack there.
Well, I just want to see if you're being compliant because we do have
I might be
officials
easy
on
to
the
talk
show.
about politics. Yeah. The I'd say, man, the aspects, everything that goes into supporting the gut and thinking more about how stress responses and stress hormones affect the gut and the immune system, and it affects the immune system multiple ways, obviously, but via the gut. You know, I didn't understand the diversity and the importance of that diversity and all the intricate features that go into a healthy functioning gut. I
Yeah.
thought my knowledge on gut was more dominated by Chinese medicine understanding, which is very nuanced for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh
But
yeah.
then the amount of information that exists that's existed for a while, there's so much research on these individual microbes, and I don't study them all, but there's a few that I focus more on. But man, I had a real simplistic idea of the gut and its relationship to everything else.
Let's hear
And
it.
yeah, now it's like um way more complex, and especially, I think we've talked about this. I think one of the, and this is newer understanding, is the metabotypes. And I used to think that if you gave somebody something and it didn't elicit a response, within, we're talking like, weeks, that it just wasn't effective for them. And now, understanding metabotypes, I have a completely different understanding with that. And I talk to patients like, you may need to be on this for an extended period of time before you start to see any changes in the impact that it can for your overall health. So I'd say the metabotypes is something I
Mm.
knew nothing about.
Yeah.
And the studies on that have changed my idea of absorption versus being bioactive, and two, treating the gut bacteria like
Mm.
they're your patient, and then when they're healthy, treating the person.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and yeah, couldn't agree more because everything's so nuanced. And if you look at the genetic material in the bacteria, it's influencing your genetic material. Everything's related there. So Lactobacillus plantarum, do you use that at all from BioOptimizers?
Not from biooptimizers.
But you use Lactobacillus plantarum. I mean, it's if you think about like some of the main bacteria that you need to feed the brain. And what David Perlmutter, I believe, is the first person I heard talk about this, but it's one of the first bacteria that we get inoculated with. And then it's also the one that gets depleted that can lead to conditions like Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that. And so if we looked at the gut and we said, man, right now we have a very strict screening process when it comes to regenerative medicine, like using, perinatal tissue sources where the mother's, her health history has been thoroughly vetted, even the paternal side. They're ruling out any mothers who've had the COVID vaccine. And so it creates this nice environment, but the next level would be like, let's do a stool test and let's see that before we decide like, hey, this tissue is going to be, optimized. I think that would be kind of an interesting place. But one thing that we have looked at, and I'm going to share this study for those of you who have not jumped into the world of plasma exchange, you may want to consider it, because plasma exchange is an interesting thing that I just, I came across this study because I'm in a group called Da Vinci 50. Dan, you need to join me in that group soon. It's so fun. And I told you went to a rodeo last time, right? And Carefree.
Yeah.
I mean, bull riding. It was so fun that I took Jess there. She came and met me a couple nights later. But there's all these great researchers, and there's these amazing stem cell and regenerative medicine doctors. One is Tim Nelson, and he's a PhD, MD, and he's got a company called We Build Hearts. And he's got the first FDA approval to treat, infants with congenital heart defects with stem cells. And he also is able to use the same kind of induced stem cells to treat patients who've had congestive heart failure. There's another very famous researcher. He's in Argentina, but he's also in Wake Forest. Named Dr. Mobiglia, and he treats a lot of patients who have like spinal cord injury. So you go to his office in Argentina and you see like these people who, haven't been able to walk, and they're walking around, and it's just like miraculous. But the three of us all agree, I said, well, we can't use any kind of manipulated stem cells in the United States. It's illegal unless you have a, clinical trial. And Tim Nelson was like one of the first doctors to get it, and he's the kindest guy. But we all agree on this one thing with stem cells, is that if you don't fix the environment, like even if you're using induced stem cells, it's not going to have the same impact. You're not going to get the same therapeutic outcome as if you were using this. And so here's a study with cord plasma exchange. And Dan, do you remember the young plasma world, like where billionaires are like buying blood from young donors? And
Yeah.
I mean, it just sounds like weird, like, and they did it on an island with, Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, I don't know about that side of it, but cord plasma is talked about a lot in that group, and they're doing it in a different way. They're putting patients on this dialysis machine and pulling out the old plasma and then replacing with albumin. And so I started looking at that, and I'm like, man, that is a clunky process. And getting those machines is like, I mean, you can spend a couple $100,000, and then just to do the procedure, it's 4 to 6 hours. And most clinics are charging anywhere from $12K to, upwards of $150 a year to do it multiple times. And I said, maybe there's an easier way. And I found this study on the umbilical cord plasma concentrate. And this study is interesting because they wanted to basically, look at the difference between using both modalities. Like, what if you just took cord plasma concentrate? And yes, you can do it in a bigger vial, and you can do IVs, and there's clinics doing that. But we just wanted something that would allow our patients to get even better on the detoxification side and clean out the plasma. And that cleaning up the plasma in and of itself is going to have a massive impact on your gut, on your immune system. And so this study was kind of a revelation. And then, believe it or not, Dan, I was the first person in the clinic to do this treatment. And in this model, they did this 1 cc injection of concentrated umbilical cord plasma. And they did it every week for 10 weeks. And they looked at biometrics before they did it and then after. And the results are pretty amazing, not only on the, they looked at the DNA methylation, but also their blood markers. And so we can jump in here, but Dan, what relationship, and I'm going to put you on the spot yet again today, but what relationship do you see that the plasma in our blood has with the gut and the health of the biome of the gut, and maybe even the liver?
Well, there's going to be a several, different aspects to that. I think anything that's, the health of the plasma, and we have the growth factors in the plasma. We have, especially when we're not talking about separated plasma, we still have the white blood cells in there. One of the things we have to remember is any barrier, one side of the barrier is the specific tissue, the other side of that barrier is the vasculature. So the blood-brain barrier is obviously like astrocytes from the brain, and then in your vasculature. And there's actually these things called, just a key note that a lot of people may not know, these things called circumventricular organs in the brain, that there is no blood-brain barrier. It's like your pituitary pieces of your hypothalamus. So there's nothing to stop the, inflammatory process to actually getting in the brain. But your gut barrier, one side's going to be your endothelial cells, and the other side's going to be one side's going to be endothelial cells from your blood vessel, and the other side's going to be your enterocytes from your gut. So a barrier is one side's always blood, right?
Yep.
So that's going to be a key piece. So the plasma helps, the health of the plasma helps maintain the endothelial tissue, right? And so that's a key piece of healthy gut function, is maintaining a barrier. So that's just one huge piece of that. And then, if the plasma is healthy, we talk about age-related immune dysregulation. Keeping your blood healthy, keeping the plasma healthy, is also going to help maintain normal immune cell function. So there's so many different aspects. The growth factors, the regulatory functions, the barrier support, being able to offset the oxidative stress, that there's so many aspects to that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because if you think about plasma, I mean, it's getting rid of waste. It also transports some nutrients. It's
right.
It's because the blood itself is water soluble, so it's like, that's one of the reasons why when you see these excess lipids floating through the blood, some people get pretty freaked out, but helps with clotting, immunity, because you're getting all your antibodies, your immunoglobulins. And I think the coolest thing that you'll see in this study is that if you have clean plasma, and for those of you who do platelet-rich plasma in your office, you'll see like the color in your healthy patients when you pull out their blood and you centrifuge it down, and it's like this beautiful gold color. And that's when you've got like, okay, there's these rich levels of platelets here. But the nice thing about it is if you can keep your cord plasma healthy, just like Dan was saying, it's going to influence every single area of your body. And let's look at this when it comes to an aging perspective. But I look at this, if you have patients who have gut issues, we see this now as like a primary, basically a detox, a cleanse before patients do any kind of regenerative therapy. So if they're coming out to get stem cells in their knees, for example, will say, hey, cord plasma exchange is a really good way of clearing out all of that waste in the blood that does seem to accumulate as we age, so that you get better signaling. Because in the cells, if you guys remember, mesenchymal stem cells, the name was changed, named by Arnold Kaplan, who also changed the name to medicinal signaling cells. But one of the things that he talks about is the fact that you have pericytes that are wrapped around the structure of all your blood vessels. And those pericytes can get activated when you've got really healthy expression from the blood. And so you activate your own stem cells just by cleaning out the blood, and by using umbilical cord plasma. We found it to be a very easy way. So here's the details of the study. Once again, they did receive injections, intramuscular. You can do them subcutaneously. It's all going to get to the same place. It doesn't leave like any welts. By the way, Dan, when you use the ACE 031, it takes a minute it leaves a little welt, takes a few days to go down, because it's a 1 cc injection once a week. And it's, for some reason, it's pretty burly, but the average age was 74. They took them through a 10-week period. So the biomarkers they looked at, epigenetic age, they're looking at the methylation groups on the DNA. They looked at telomeres as well. They looked at any kind of like the standard biomarkers of organ dysfunction. And that's pretty interesting if you ever get a chance to look at the biomarkers of organ dysfunction and look at how each organ system in the body ages. They looked at mitochondrial DNA copy numbers. And then the number one thing they found is the concentrate was safe. There's over 20 clinical biomarkers that were significantly and beneficially altered. They found that kidney function, specifically creatinine, decreased. The GFR estimation improved. They found that there's 3 of the 4, and I think this is probably one of the biggest ones, 3 of the 4 immunoglobulin biomarkers decreased as well. So reducing that overall inflammation that sets in, especially in the 70s, in our 70s. And then they also found that on the DNA methylation based Grimm age, they were able to reduce it by an average of 0.82 years. So essentially, just by doing this, you add almost a month and a half onto your life every year. So I'm doing this twice a year, and this suggests reduction in morbidity and mortality risk. And what we've seen, we're well over 150 of these therapies, and we're seeing really substantial improvements in patients who have had like almost like a relapse of symptoms, like pain comes back, or in one case, it was a rheumatoid arthritis. His rheumatoid arthritis came back. We sent him the vials. That went away. We see people sleeping better. That was the biggest thing I noticed. I added about 21 minutes of deep sleep every night. And then we've also seen people just with overall energy levels improved, people feeling just like they recover faster from workouts. Just from this simple, substance that's thrown away. And cool thing about Dr. Korth is I called him up in January. His team had it ready for me by February. I utilized it, and then we started deploying it. And it's been, once again, it's another game changer that not a lot of people are talking about. So before we talk about kind of the structures and what's in the cord plasma, any thoughts on this, Dan?
No, I think it's amazing that we have the access to it. We've used it with some clients, and the energy. It's been interesting. That's one of the biggest things people have noticed is their energy level increases. Like everybody that we've used it on has said that, and it speaks to the idea of somebody coming into the clinic who's getting up there in the years, or they've been hard on their body, or life's been hard on them, and they want to come in and do PRP. And it like totally changed the studies and what we're seeing with it totally changed my ideas on like, hey, we don't do PRP until we've tested your blood, right? Because why would, if we see this aging process and this plasma that gets disrupted, because it's exposed to everything. The plasma is being damaged and depleted by everything that gets into the blood. And so it makes sense why people are going to have these regenerative effects. They're going to have this anti-aging effect, increasing energy. But at the same time, it's like, we may not want to just say, let's be, we started doing labs, like, our offices, we do labs on people who do any type of, when we're doing stem cell or exosomes or any type of birth tissue. But now, we're also like, if you're looking at PRP, we may want to see what the quality of your blood is. Because you look at some people's labs, you're like, there's no way in hell I'm going to use your PRP on you. And I definitely would use it on me,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're like, hey, I don't want to risk our reputation.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just like, yeah, like, but here's a great therapy. I mean, and even this cord plasma, I mean, no reason why you couldn't use this in place of PRP as well. I mean, there's probably a different way that Buzz has some things processed. So it looks like we got a few questions. Danny, awesome to have you here. I've done it myself and dramatically calmed my autoimmune rosacea. Now I haven't implemented it as an official treatment in the clinic yet. Yeah, it's great. It's an easy one to get set up. I mean, Buzz, it's like overnight you can get it to somebody.
Yeah.
And then do you have a link to those cord plasma studies? I do. Kate, I'm going to ask you in the back end if you can snag that. That would be great. If not, then I can show it to you, Danny. But yeah. So here's some of the properties of it, and I think as you look at the properties in cord plasma, you probably notice that there's some peptides that actually work on some of these same pathways. So insulin-like growth factor, IGF-1. Huh. Ever heard of that peptide, Dan? Or do you know anything about IGF-1?
IGF-1. No, that is I feel like you're speaking gibberish to me. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so it's only Dan's like favorite peptide, well, one of his favorite stacks. But yeah, if you think of IGF-1, I mean, if you haven't used this peptide, you'll notice you sleep better. You just feel like you're 18 again. That's when I first used it. That's when I learned how to wake surf with Cade. It was like 10 years ago and I'd never done it. And I just got up like instantly and I was like, holy cow, this is crazy. My legs, I was like, I feel strong. But stills like that. So in the cord plasma, you're getting this like young IGF-1. And remember, the cord plasma is like, it's in this protective zone. And so it, it has tissue repair, it has anti-inflammatory effects, it downregulates pro-inflammatory cytokines. I mean, it's just, it's a nice healing agent for your blood vessels. It's got transforming growth factor beta. This is great for tissue regeneration, wound healing. What percentage of our clients would you say have wounds inside of their vascular system from, various means, blood sugar dysregulation or chemical exposure infections?
Yeah, I mean, even just the damage to that glycocalyx inside the vasculature. I mean, I'd say 100%, without a doubt.
Did you know you just called it a vasculature? I like that. Inside the vasculature.
Did I say it with that strong of an accent?
Well, I just like, I used a little bit of kind of some artistic licensing on that one, but the vasculature.
Vasculature, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
and then if follow me out on that.
Someone's got to. I mean, you just intimidate the hell out of so many people, Dan, with your smartiness. So we'll catch you occasionally, but yeah, even the T cells, the macrophages, endothelial growth factors. So VEGF, like, what peptide is known for activating VEGF. Oh yeah, BPC 157, thymosin beta 4. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys catching this? Like, I mean, even the TGF beta, like, that's a big one for thymosin alpha 1. Like, see, I mean, you're getting all these natural peptides, but massive quantities of it, and in a natural state. Here's another platelet-derived growth factor. So it heals connective tissues, helps with the proliferation of fibroblasts, smooth muscle cells. I mean, it's pretty cool because, if you just look at these properties and you say, man, what would it take and how much would it cost, first of all, to get all these substances compounded? It would be a fortune, if you wanted to infuse your patients with all of these peptides. But the cord plasma is very affordable, and especially when you compare it to cord plasma exchange, where you pull all your blood out and go through plasmapheresis, and then you exchange it with plasma. I think it's pretty amazing. Any others stand out to you, Dan?
I mean, I love the EPO. I think it's awesome, and the hepatocyte growth factor. Just healing up that liver is great.
What about EPO? Cade, you had what were you going to say about this?
There was a question that came in, or a comment that says, looks like it is contraindicated in cancer. So just I wanted
Looks
to.
like everything is contraindicated in cancer, by the way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the VEGF because of angiogenesis, depending on the type of cancer, you want to you just gotta choose wisely when you're doing it. But even like remember we used to worry about stem cells, do they feed cancer? But we know that that's not the case because it's not that you're not giving additional cells that can become cancer because that lineage is already where it is. It's not his body doesn't recruit stem cells to feed a cancerous process. But yeah, definitely I'd say sometimes growth factors. So you got to choose wisely. I think
Just
everything
be
has its
smart.
what we've been looking at, and this is really fascinating, is nandrolone and oxandrolone with
Hmm.
cancer patients that like a prostate cancer where they can't have testosterone.
Are you
But
kidding? Wow.
yeah, so you can use those to protect lean muscle mass, to stop any like sarcopenia or cachexia, and they still feel good. Their energy levels are good, but you're not giving them an androgenic hormone, so it doesn't interfere with the prostate cancer. Isn't that fascinating? It's
Wow. And other risks that you've seen with it? I mean, is it
you just have to watch like hepatotoxicity. You get in a dose that is too high. So you just watch those liver markers, make sure you're feeding their protein. But there's actually some research studies. Rob, when we had Rob on the
yeah.
on the collaborative, Rob's got all these research studies that show that these like the oxandrolone and the nandrolone, which is like Anavar, they actually have anti-cancer properties.
Sheesh. Well, you'd
Yeah.
almost expect the opposite because they are pro-growth. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
imagine they are activating mTOR pretty substantially.
Yeah.
But how cool is that?
Yeah. Pretty fascinating. So there are alternatives when you're dealing with cancers,
Jeez. Well, and even, you mentioned EPO. I mean, Dan turned me on to ARA 290 a few years ago. And that one is a game changer if you're looking for like crazy endurance. And it helps reduce oxidative stress. So for those of you endurance athletes, this is your way to go. I mean, it's phenomenal. But and then we go back to the gut and we say, okay, well, how does this relate? Well, it's healing those endothelial cells, and it's activating your body's own production of these parasites can now become medicinal signaling cells, and just they go to work at healing all the vascularity in your body. And then if you look at the hepatocyte growth factor, I mean, your liver is the most regenerative organ in the body. And so you're just going to speed up that process by utilizing some of these benefits in cord plasma. So that is, I think as far as breakthroughs, it's been a phenomenal way to go. Kate, you had some additional insights on it, and love to. Oh, here and there's. Oh, wow, there's a bunch of stuff in there. Or I'll let you tell us what's going on in the chat because I can't keep up. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, sorry. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a few questions that came in just to the panelists, but one of them was just regarding plasma exchange. I was curious if it was, talking about they're using the reference here from RJ was a plasma exchange for removing BPA and plastics. And there was a doctor that was kind of talking about it in their clinic. And I don't know the exact doctor, but it sounds like they were referring to the plasma exchange where you like draw out the plasma and then reinfuse new plasma, which that's completely different procedure, but similar concept, right?
Yeah, and that would be interesting. They didn't test the removal of plastics or BPA in this one, but the concept, as I've talked to other doctors about it, the concept was to have the same type of therapeutic benefit. So anytime you're activating your body's own regenerative properties, now your blood, I mean, you think of plastics that get built up when we're younger versus when we get older, we have a lot harder time detoxifying. And so they're saying it flushes out the blood in a very similar fashion as if you were to pull it all out. So it's almost the equivalent, but we need to measure BPA and plastics. That would be interesting. Kate, do you mind just eating a bunch of plastic, like in your microwave, like, just warm things up in like your Mountain Dew bottles and, soups, things like that. And then we'll test you before, we'll make sure your levels are high, and then we'll do the cord plasma and check it after.
That's perfect. That sounds like a great experiment for you.
Yeah, to see the data, and I appreciate you being willing to subject yourself to plastics for science.
I'll use all my Mountain Dew bottles. I have them all stacked behind me, and I'll just shove some stuff in there, warm them up. It'll be perfect.
What was the last time you
I'm
had?
sure I won't reduce my biological age at all.
When was the last time you had Mountain Dew? I haven't had a Mountain Dew in forever. That's funny.
It's probably been like 20, 30, I don't know, 20 years, 10.
There's so many versions now.
Yeah, I thought it was just one.
Yeah. Do the do, man.
Yeah, we
just going back to the umbilical cord, these plasma procedures have just been awesome for patients. Like I've done it for myself. I was just chatting with Danny. He's done it. I think he talked about his sister last week or last month when we were on here. And her results on kind of just calming down her autoimmune. He had some great results for himself. Clinically, we've seen it just do some amazing things from just really calming the inflammation. And I think it's awesome. It's a great option if you're looking for some additional services there to add in. It's incredible. Yeah, so RJ,
go ahead.
The procedure you're talking about with Dr. Smith, the plasma exchange, I just looked her up to make sure I wasn't misquoting you, but yeah, she's talking about the plasmapheresis type procedure, which is, it's really cool. It's just it's pretty extensive. You got some pretty robust machinery just to get that procedure done. Sorry, Dan, what were you gonna say?
No, I've even had I have a long haulers patient, and they did incredible with the plasma.
Yeah.
It's been incredible.
So we've seen too. It's wild. Put them on some Buloki, the lumbrokinase, the thymosin alpha 1, LF37 combo from Texas ProMed, and it's awesome.
Yeah, this guy is like he's on the go, not a lot of chance to like, do some massive changes to diet and supplementation. We put him on nattokinase, and then
Yeah.
um, add him on some vascular repair. Put him on. He was able to travel with this, so he set up he was doing the injection every day.
Yeah.
I think it was 20 days. I think it's what we ended up doing. And
Cool.
then the other thing that we did to make life simple is we got the patches. We did the BPC with glutathione, and then had him follow up with the NAD patches from Buzz. And while he was doing the cord plasma, he was just traveling. And he's like, man, I haven't done hardly any changes to my lifestyle. And I can't believe how much energy I already have, and how much better I feel. And it was just like, doing an injection in the morning, sticking a patch on, and then going about his day. It was incredible.
Man. Well, and I think that's where a lot of us, we early on, if you remember 10 years ago, Dan, we just expected our clients to just do everything. They had to be so compliant, couldn't deviate from the diet. And we had one of our doctors, Kate probably remembers him, who was such a dick to patients. He'd be like, I know you're eating gluten. Like he'd like have his, just like, I bet you may know who I'm talking about, Dan. And, just like guilt him and be like, well, you're eating sugar and it's your fault that you're not getting better. And it's like so
Yeah.
much nicer these days where we can actually use therapies that are very safe and they can make changes even if they don't go 100% in.
That really is the coolest thing with like peptides, the umbilical cord plasma, like you see changes even without the huge lifestyle changes. Because
Yeah.
it is the hardest thing as a whether you're a practitioner or someone in the clinic like health coach, and you're just working with someone trying to get them to cut out gluten, eliminate all the triggers, and then eat the right calories, and they just don't. It's so hard, but if you can get those little pieces that make it easier for them to make the changes, as well as just start seeing results, feeling better, and that energy. Oh man, it's super rewarding too.
Yeah. I think like the ultimate biohack right now is put someone on hormones, give them some like semaglutide, cut down how much they're eating, even just for a short while, give their body a break, throw the patches on them, give them some plasma, then also give them the exosome injections. They don't have to do anything. They just slow down what they're doing, let their body heal, give it everything it needs. I mean, it's crazy what a person that does that exact protocol, what that can actually do for somebody,
Oh,
right? I mean,
yeah.
we have the tools for them. I don't think it massively sets up a really great trajectory, but for in the meantime, you slow down how much they're taking in, that minimizes their toxicity. Give them the things that keep their body healthy, give them the reparative molecules that they need to make it happen. And if you can throw IVs on top of that, holy shit. Like it's like the ultimate biohack.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be so hard. And one of the things that you can use too, if you're not into GLP-1s or but you still want to help them, like Tesofensin is great because their brain just feels like supercharged. I love
Yeah,
Tesofensin.
yeah, I cannot do that. I tried it. I got to do like a lower dose. I get up at 4:30, and I was taking Tesofensin at 4:30 in the morning, and at 10 o'clock that night, I'd be like so awake. I can't turn
Yeah.
it off. You know.
Were you taking I mean 1 milligram, 2, 3, what were you at? Or do you remember?
Uh, you know what? Hold on. I'll look. I'll tell you. Here it
Okay.
is.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know Tesofensin, it's really powerful because it works on dopamine, serotonin, and epinephrine. It's like a nootropic, but it does have some appetite suppressive qualities.
I was taking the 0.5 milligram capsule.
0.5 and you were
5? Just one?
I Dude, I'm not kidding you. Look, the bottle is still so full because I was like, I'm doing like right now. If I have a night where I didn't sleep very much and I gotta really be on, I'll take one. It's crazy how awesome it is. But um there's too much cranium up here for me to not be able to turn off. So it's not a good thing. It takes the break off. I'm like, holy shit,
Yes.
got all these ideas.
Do be careful with tesofensin, but if your brain's not already on overdrive, it's really helpful.
Yeah, no, it's we've had a couple other clients take. I gotta tell you this story. This is a great story. I had a patient come in and she was interested in weight loss. Didn't want to do the GLPs. She's pretty healthy. She spent some time with doing functional med, and she's always got a few things that seem off, and I can't ever place it. She's younger, and we got her on tesofensin, and she was like, "I'm not noticing like any difference," and I was like, "How? How are you not noticing?" And she went up to the 1 milligram, nothing, and then the other about a week and a half ago, we were talking, and she was like, "Yeah, I had a wild weekend." I'm like, "What's a wild weekend for you?" And so I go to a lot of shows. I'm like, "Okay." She's like, recreational, experiences, and I'm like, "What does that mean? What's recreational for you? Weed?" And she was like, "No." She's like, "I'll do cocaine," and I'm like, "Well, tesofensin's like one molecule away from cocaine, and you're probably doing way more than you would get from tesofensin." I was like, "That's why she's not noticing the tesofensin."
No kidding.
And I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's like,
"By the way, we need to have a talk about that now because you've never talked to me about that."
yes, thanks for telling me about your recreational. Isn't it funny? I had a client like that too. And Park City is pretty big, the drug. And
Yeah.
I had a dude who was just like stressed out of his mind. I'm like, so do you mind if I just ask you a couple questions? And I'm not assuming anything, so you can slap me if you want, but I'm like, what kind of recreational drugs are you into? And he's like, oh, I'll do occasionally, I'm like outside of alcohol. He's like, occasionally I'll do some weed and I've done a couple trips, and I'm like, anything else? And he's like, yeah, I'll do a little bump here and there. I'm like moguls? And he's like, and I'm like such an idiot about it. He's like,
Yeah.
no, no, no. Like, a bump. And I'm like, I was like, felt like an idiot afterwards. He's like, yeah, cocaine. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, but that was the reason. It's like, come on,
Yeah.
like it's so
Yeah.
hard on the nervous system. And so the crazy thing about tesofensin is it works on the same pathways, but it lacks the same structure that makes it addictive and habit forming. So you don't have this like massive come down. But that's where you got to be careful with the dosing and yeah, but it's yeah, that is funny. Yeah. I would imagine if I would have put that gentleman on tesofensin, he'd be like, "What is this? Is crap!" Like,
Yeah, it's just like, is this a sugar pill? That's how,
Yeah.
it changed our discussion. And I said, "Well, so are we after longevity?" She's like, "Look, I want you to keep me healthy enough to maintain the lifestyle I'm living right now."
I want you to
Okay.
keep me healthy so I can do my
so
Yes.
recreational
intranasal stem
drugs.
cells
So
after every weekend.
yeah,
Yeah,
so that
that's
I
a
can be
great client.
recreational. Yeah. Right.
I get that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's
Like,
the world we live in right now, which is in the past you'd kind of have to pass judgment, but right now it's like, okay, well, even if you want that lifestyle, I have people who are very high profile. If I mention their names, you'd know them, and it's like they're not willing to make certain changes, but they still are willing to go through the protocol. And I'm like, cool. And then when we run their labs, they get healthier. And so it's like, all right, yeah, it's great. So,
yeah.
yeah. So anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the Go Wellness Collaborative today. We just, we want to make it fun and also explain, some of the cool new therapies that are there from, looking at it from a gut perspective and then all the way through the regenerative medicine perspective and show how all is connected. So appreciate you guys being on. We'll be on next month. Kay, do you have the date on that one next month?
Ooh, it is. Give me just a second. I will get that for everybody.
Drew, good to have you on. You got it.
Ha.
Good to see you.
Yeah, so next up will be November 22nd.
Okay.
You guys be ready to rock and roll November 22nd. Bring your friends, tell your colleagues how rad the Go Wellness Collaborative community is. And then if you guys want to get more involved, we have a WhatsApp chat. Not a lot going on in there, but I think we could get some more collaboration there, so we can stay in touch in the meantime when we're not here live. And then if you want to dive really deep, we got all the recordings. There's also some mini courses, and then there's a lot of different levels to just like deep dive into peptides, so you can be the ultimate peptide expert, regenerative medicine expert, functional medicine expert. So some really good stuff. So I posted the link in the chat box, gowellness.com/collab-membership-options. So yeah, to take a look at that, and yeah, dive in. Thanks everybody for joining us. Dan and Reagan, holy smokes. Really fun episode, really fun to be with you guys and just see you in action. And it never ceases to like bring new concepts, new content. Like I don't understand how you guys like come up with like there's always something new that we're exploring and finding, and it's just fascinating the time that you guys spend on research and just understanding things. So helpful for everyone in this community, and for me too. So thank you guys. It's awesome to hear.
Yeah. Well, I think our next episode is going to be the best one yet. Dan's our creative director, so I don't need any other. I don't do the work. Dan does the work. I just ask him the question and just kind of hold on and see what direction he's going to go and try to add a little bit of horsepower here and there. But
it's funny. It'd be good for everybody to know that we only decide what our topic's going to be. We rarely break out like specific things, and so it is like improv, like 90% improv.
Yeah, we'll have a little bullet points, but then it's
occasionally and that's more for the audience. It's just so we don't lose callers, for the fact finders out there. But the best thing is, like when we get on these threads, like I always learn great things from Dan, and then I'm like, cool, I'm going to instantly implement those into the practice. And so, I mean, I learned just as much as you guys do just by being up here grooving. And I used to spend so much time on the PowerPoint. I don't know if you guys realize, but we would do quarterly events and I would build 300 plus slides. And I finally realized, like, this is stupid. Like, we don't even make it through all the slides. I'd have this like anxiety. It's like, there's not going to be enough information and people are going to be pissed. And then we get through like the morning and I'm like, we didn't even make it through half the slides, guys. Like we gotta hustle and get these slides.
Gotta hurry.
Yeah, it's what always, and we've talked about this so many times, right? Of how like you'll be on something and I'll be on something similar. And
parallel, yeah.
Yeah, it's the amount of like reading and research that you and I do is crazy, and it always seems to like correlate really well with each other. So we never, I don't think we ever get into everything that we've ever talked about or researched in the past and what we're currently reading. Look, I feel like some of our episodes we're just dabbling into some of the stuff we're finding. It's crazy.
Yeah, no question about it. So don't miss next month. We're gonna do a really cool behind the scenes episode, and excited for that. So thanks you guys, and Don't forget to get out there and vote because Dan shared his political affiliation. Now you guys got to share yours.
Let's go. Yeah, and my challenge to all the listeners would be just like what Reagan said, is take some of these keys and like start using it. Because that's really where the rubber hits the road, is if we can like spread our message and this amazing research and content that's on the cutting edge. If you guys can implement that into your clinics, into your practice, that's where our mission gets accomplished. So hopefully everyone got some good takeaways. Take at least one piece and start figuring out how to implement that clinically.
Hey, Cade, one of the things I found really interesting is this week I had a new peptide rep come into the office and was talking to me, and he's talking to me about peptides, and I was able to tell him a lot more about the peptides than he was able to tell me. And he's like, where can I get some of the training? And I said, I'll hook you up with Go Wellness, and you can purchase our peptide course. And it's interesting because I know we're always doing cutting edge stuff, but we're so far ahead on a lot of it that some of the content that has been out there that we have, I would recommend, if people don't know what we're talking about, definitely getting in on some of our the content that we've produced and that's available to our clients, because like I said, this is the second rep that's come in, and we're like, hey, I like what you got. I'll consider it because of the pricing and the quality. But if you want to learn, this is where you need to go. And it's already been out there. That's what's incredible of where we're at. So highly encourage everybody to get on and look at what's available, because we have it was an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes on the collaboratives, but also all of the content that we have available is amazing.
Deep wisdom, yeah, because Dan's got his courses on there. We've got all our recordings from previous events, and then we got our own courses to build your practice and learn all the cool medicine. So and go ahead and plug in something in WhatsApp. I dare you guys to, and we'll get that community revitalized. But anyway, until next time, appreciate you guys.
Love you all. Have a good one.
Bye bye.